Hey, thanks so much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. And I'm excited to talk about our trip to London. I think most people enjoy a trip to London. We got to benefit from learning a lot from this trip to London, and kind of underwritten by just the concept, like if you want to do the best in these efforts, you have to look at real, like top performing peers. And that's what London is. For everybody's benefit, Jonathan Hopkins, former executive director of Commuter Seattle in Seattle, and setting up TMAs in South Florida. So have a fairly long history working in TDM and shared mobility. We're going to talk about major global sporting events that offer a lot of opportunities. There's opportunities to shine. There's opportunities to fail disastrously in front of a very global audience. Our trip to London showed that success is based on a well-worn path of best practice that was very, very clear. But they got to those best practices after having moments of disaster, or at least within their institutions felt like disaster. And a goal of talking about this today is how do we get the lessons without the disaster? That's always like a happier path. On this image are like different words that all reflect one of the lessons that we'll talk about today. We're going to go through these kind of in order from early and pre-planning to, after the event. And we'll just dive into it. So the venues that we visited uh, are enviable, right? Wembley Stadium is notorious in great ways. Wimbledon, Tottenham for the Tottenham Hotspurs, went to Manchester. We also stopped by TFL, and then worked with the TDM organization for England and the UK. Great experiences to be able to go here. The fun that we had in the like unrivaled access to be next to the pitch at Wembley or at center court at Wimbledon was matched and exceeded by what we learned from practitioners. Like in the upper left-hand corner, the guy who's been doing this at Wimbledon has been doing it for 22 years. Very British and just very knowledgeable. But that was just emblematic of what we came across in our entire time there. So, like I said, the learnings were key here. And so we'll just dive into them. The number one learning, or the earliest piece that I think strategically is part of the critical path to success, if you kind of don't have this, you will underperform anything that London does, is they set targets with their stadiums that are legally binding. They're not the only place to do this. I know Seattle does with major facilities and with their new hockey arena. But they set targets that get measured every year or every 2 years by an independent entity. And if they don't meet their targets for the number of cars that are driving to the facility, then the local authority can demand that they spend more money on programming and incentives. Miraculously, they always hit their targets. What are those targets? We can start with Manchester. Definitely not London. They have a couple trams, and otherwise it's a bus service. 50% of people going to Etihad Stadium from Man City or Manchester United, have to get there in a way other than the car. If we go into outside the core of London, Tottenham Stadium for the Tottenham Hotspurs, they doubled their stadium size from 36,000 to close to 70,000 people, but the number of cars going to their stadium went down. Wimbledon has pretty much the same target, and Wembley has anywhere from 85 to 95% of the people attending their events getting there without a car. What's amazing about doing this is you end up like a lot of times in a stadium or a facility or an employer in the United States, their focus is on tickets and getting money in the door. And then they'll say, well, we can't do anything else. Like, what if they don't come and we don't sell out our concert and we don't make enough money, right? But if their pathway to being able to be in operation is they achieve the targets the city and local authority want, then everybody ends up on the same side of the ball. Like you have a rugby scrum, but there's only one team, and everybody is fighting for less congestion. And it works. It works in Seattle. It works in London. Second, if we have the World Cup a year away, um, we can't see anybody. It's a webinar, but is there anybody who wouldn't want to know how people are going to travel in a year? Like if you could know right now, like you're making all these plans, shuttles be here, trains are here. I wish we had trains maybe, or like whatever the case may be. Um, wouldn't you want to know how people are going to actually use that system? In London, they do. And they work with a company that demonstrated this there, but basically imagine Google Maps, their transit function where you could prioritize the things that show up first, and where all of the custom shuttles and custom mobility are also in the mapping app, and people put in their destination, like their hotel to the stadium, as soon as they get their ticket. The next step they do is they enter, okay, how am I going to get there? because there's really only two times when people are going to think about mobility to the World Cup. It's when they're booking their hotel and their ticket, and when they're there the day of or the day before. And if they don't plan it out in advance, like we know less and they know less. So Wimbledon uses this. TFL has relationships here. It's been tested with, like the Commonwealth Games and others. Not only does it map you to the stadium, it maps you to the gate that you're supposed to go to for your tickets, which assumes extra importance if you have two teams battling each other who are violent rivals, right? You don't want them all going through the same, you don't want them on the same shuttles, you don't want them the same anything. Finally, when somebody, 40 to 50% of people that get this email, they plan their trip out a year in advance or six, whenever they buy their tickets, right? And so it allows an email to these people like a couple days out, reminding their itinerary, but it also allows adjustment. If you find out, okay, suddenly we don't have enough shuttle buses for a certain route, or a bridge is out that we thought was going to be open, or there's a disruption on a tube line, they can redirect people. So it creates a method of engagement, because otherwise we show up on game day with the same level of uncertainty the teams have. Like, we've thrown a bunch out there, but we'll see if we win, right? This sort of tool I thought was like number two behind setting targets to making sure things are successful. Number three is pretty straightforward. Even in London at Wembley, right in the core of the city, direct shuttles are important to relative transit deserts to get fans to the game. The fans pay for the full cost of these. Again, using some of those pre-booking tools and predictive tools, they can make sure they have the net right on buses. But this is at zero net cost to the arena, to the stadium. And it gets a lot of people there. Certainly in the United States, not all our cities have great rail systems. This will be key. Fourth, we learned, and this was also lessons from disaster, like these photos are from Wembley. In 2020, they had a disaster. They checked tickets right at the edge of the stadium. So people who didn't have tickets were also right at the edge of the stadium. And we just kind of like learned that they have three different levels of security plans for Wembley, depending on the level of threat. Like Lady Gaga concert, pretty harmless. People just do the same thing they did at Wembley in 2020 for the Euro Cup. But if they have more contested matches or they just expect, more challenges, then they have additional security perimeters, and their transportation plan and their security plan have to be tied. If you can't get people out fast enough, that can be a problem. If you have too many people in the wrong places, that can be a problem. And if they get too close to the stadium without a ticket, that can be a problem. Those plans must be linked, but that's Europe. This sort of thing would never happen here, right? Not so fast, right? A year ago at Hard Rock Stadium, just a few miles to the north of where I am right now, it wasn't just 2,000 unticketed people that got into the stadium, 7,000 did. They found people in HVAC vents, which is what people are climbing into now to get into the stadium. Escalators were destroyed by people going up it, people climbing over it. They had 4 times the number of police that they had for a normal soccer event, and it wasn't enough. There should not be fans near your stadium that don't have tickets is one takeaway, at least for like higher threat games. And we shouldn't plan our soccer events as if it's people going to a Lady Gaga concert, right? This is not necessarily the same. And so this is one of the fastest ways for a city to find disaster. In one of the events is not to plan appropriately from this, and the transport plan and the security plan are linked. And I guess I said like on this, like fan is short for fanatic. Ask yourself why it applies here. Um, Operations Center and ongoing communication throughout. This is the Manchester Operations Center that all roads and transit are coordinated through. So think of it as a mix of a traffic operations center and an emergency operations center, because you have to have, what if the power goes out? What if a bunch of different things, right? And so managing this thing with all hands on deck is giving it the respect that it deserves. So strongly recommended to follow this sort of approach. And this sort of approach, like of working together on the plans, matters from game day minus 360 all the way through beyond the end of the match. For examples why, again, from like disaster world, there's a game where the Great Northern Railway, like they changed their train schedules. It didn't match up with game times, and it also didn't match up with when the train drivers were told to show up, and it didn't actually just match with anything, right? And so there's people trying to go to major events, soccer matches that couldn't make it during like playoffs. There are people who couldn't exit those matches. None of the trains showed up, yada yada. It has to be a team effort involving all team participants from the beginning. Great Northern Railway is never going to have that mistake again, but they had that problem because they didn't prepare in advance and think about all the contingencies, right? And so testing all of our plans with what could go wrong to make sure that we're not messing those things up or that you're dealing with the exigent circumstances that you can't control is really, really important. And we saw that in spades everywhere, you know, managing tube stations and everything. Like the TFL managed tube stations, others managed the walk from the tube station to the stadium, but everything was covered down on it. It's all coordinated. Finally, linger is the one I put on a sign on the first slide, but your peak demand is probably going to exceed your transportation capacity. So they do a really good job in London of getting some people to show up early. Sometimes that's a fan zone experience for some of these places, but here in Miami, fan zone and the stadium are 20, 30 miles apart. So getting people to show up early for great experiences and them to linger longer at great experiences, a lot better, a lot easier done in a more urban environment or a stadium or just an experience zone around a stadium. But this is what they do in London. They coordinate every piece of this to the point of, and I don't, if you see on the right-hand side of this, that's the exit. Like they have stop and go signs to manage so they don't get overcrowding on the tube platforms, which could be dangerous. So you might stop for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then you charge forward with another 8,000 people entering the station. They can evacuate 90,000 people in exactly 1 hour out of Wembley, which is just incredible. So ultimately, I think the lessons from this is an opportunity. It's a threat if we make it one, or it's an opportunity if we make it one, right? And we should be inspired that disaster is possible. So that's a great thing to avoid, but it's not the only thing to think about. Like we avoid disaster with proper planning, partnerships, using best practices and customer tools that have been proven elsewhere. But you know, the C grade performance here is getting through it, and people attend soccer and nobody dies. But like the A+ version of this is you use the World Cup to move the ball down the field and sustain that field position and don't retreat after the games are over. Because you can make a better community for the long term because we end up with better partnerships, better tools, and a city that learns to have access to things in a more efficient manner that's better for everybody. And then the last thing I'll say is we learned a lot. The experts, those team that our European colleagues put in front of us that are expert on this, or I think they're already subbing on some contracts in like Kansas City and Boston. But John Foley in the round just for the comprehensive experience. And then that tool that I showed you, and I'll put these in the chat afterwards, but that tool that I showed you that has been time tested against a bunch of events that allows people to, book and have like a sense of security of how they're going to get there. And also at the same time gives the agency an equal sense of security of like how the system's going to run. It's called USmart Thing. That's cheeky British words, I guess. But we'll put those in the chat if folks are interested, or you can contact me after for more questions. And with that, it's just a pleasure to be able to share this and to be examining like world-class performances. So here in the United States, we can do the same. Thanks, everybody.